Hi, I'm Peggy Sarlin, and today I have the great pleasure of speaking with Dr. David Haase, who's going to tell us about the remarkable results that he's getting treating complex brain conditions like Alzheimer's in his clinic in Nashville. Dr. Haase uses a variety of innovative techniques, and he's particularly enthused about regenerative plasma exchange, which he says is like an oil change for the brain. Dr. Haase is board certified in family medicine and integrative holistic medicine. He's the author of a terrific book, Curiosity Heals the Human. And he's going to make us happy because he's going to give us hope. So, welcome, Dr. Haase. Welcome.
Peggy, thank you so much for allowing me to share this time with you.
Let's get down to it. You have made a provocative remark that you don't like the term Alzheimer's. You prefer a term that I think you made up called Alzheimering, which sounds like a verb. So tell us about that. Why so?
Well, that's a great question to begin with. So, the way we see the problem is often part of the problem. And when we name something, the purpose, one of the reasons I have a license is that I have a license to diagnose and to treat. And diagnosis means to name something. And the naming of something is very powerful. If you name diabetes, oh, I have diabetes, right? And that you
Right,
have it
right.
take a certain particular set of actions to that. But if you say, you have the diagnosis of Alzheimer's, you have Alzheimer's disease, instead of it inspiring action, um, it often leads to fear, denial, and really a sense of hopelessness that goes on. Because the reality is that we're actually all Alzheimering from about age 30 on. The trajectory of our life and our health has everything to do with natural decline of aging. And so the real question is, who of us are degenerating at a more rapid rate than others? And if we can recognize that Alzheimer's disease is not a single thing, it is not a literally nothing that can be done about it, right? It's usually the idea that this noun Alzheimer's disease um, holds no hope. But the real reality of Alzheimer's disease is that it is a complex process that's moving forward, and it's Alzheimering. We're all losing a little bit every year to year, whether we like to admit that or not. The real goal is how do we hold on to as many brain cells and keep them as healthy as possible until we can have a wonderful evening of dying in our sleep peacefully, having lived a robust and amazing life.
Yeah, that sounds good. I like that goal. I'm all in for that. So by calling it Alzheimering, by rendering it from a noun into a verb,
Yeah.
you're stating it's a process and therefore processes can be changed,
Yes.
that you can intervene. You say, I don't have Alzheimer's. I have a diagnosis of Alzheimer's, and it's probably caused by factor X and Y and Z.
Mhm.
And so if I start intervening positively on factors X, Y, and Z, then maybe I can turn this thing around. It's a different mindset.
Absolutely. Isn't it hopeful when you really recognize that most everybody with the diagnosis of Alzheimer's doesn't have the same pattern? There's a huge amount of individual variability that goes on. And actually people that once had the diagnosis now are walking around that and they no longer qualify for the diagnosis because they at an early time sought out the underlying causes that were contributing to that Alzheimering process.
Well, since I first started reporting on this 10 years ago when my book was published, Awakening from Alzheimer's, there's been so much development in this field and so much more understanding of the many factors that impact the brain. And I think you have said that you have identified 1,200 different factors that influence brain health. Is that right?
We have a large database of individual genes, gene environment interactions, protein abnormalities. And when you start to break them down, the number just keeps growing because uh, think of it, I love that old idea that, how many straws do you put on a camel's back before it breaks?
Right.
That's really what we're looking at here. We're trying to understand what is the multifactorial, meaning many causes that lead towards a final state of unbraining. And that's really what dementia is. It's unbraining. And if we can identify enough of those causes early enough and intervene, we can change the trajectory of how that brain is going to experience life and the human that's carrying that brain.
And the human, yeah, well, exactly, exactly. And you have 1,200 or more different factors. That's 1,200 different ways you can start intervening. It gives you so many entry points to start improving things rather than just passively letting things degenerate and taking a medication that so far they don't work, the medications.
Right. And if you think about that, these causes interact with each other as well. So even one massive intervention, which could be daily exercise, can impact hundreds of different mechanisms by which that individual is going to be protected and even um, given the opportunity to reverse the cognitive decline that has already taken place.
So we already feel more empowered because we know that there's many factors that influence the brain, and working with a fabulous physician such as yourself, we can start taking action. We're Alzheimering. We're in this flow, and we're going to change the flow and start turning it in a positive direction. And that puts us in a mindset of healing. I mean, just even speak for a minute about if you get this diagnosis of Alzheimer's, which feels like you're underneath a 10,000-pound rock that's crushing you, and you must then get cortisol and adrenaline and all these kind of very stress hormones, which are corrosive to the brain. If you start working with you with a positive outlook, isn't your brain more primed to heal to begin with just by reframing the story?
There's really no doubt. Just think, most of us have had the experience of being in a very stressful state, maybe not having gotten enough sleep, having the boss breathing down our neck, and we are asked a question, and wait a second, what's the answer? I can't remember that. And a couple of deep breaths and a little relaxation, voila, there they go. There the answer pops in the head.
Right.
And almost everybody has experienced that. Imagine what that level of stress does to a brain that is already challenged at baseline. So, absolutely, your life experience is going to be tremendously different just from the way you see the problem again. And again, the spirit in which an act is completed is as important as the act itself. So, if you come to this diagnosis, this as a challenge, and you're saying, wow, this is another thing in my life that I'm going to grow from. And I have many patients that have shifted their mindset from an attitude of I'm helpless, I'm hopeless, there's nothing I can do, to just changing the mindset to say, wow, I've overcome all kinds of things in my life when I think about it. This is just one more thing that my extended years have given me an opportunity to grow in and through. It's not something that was asked for, not something that's necessarily welcome, but wow, that what a influence a elder can be on the next generation by how they face a challenge.
Role models here. Life is a mindset game, and facing a diagnosis like this is it's one more mindset challenge. But I want to talk. Your book is so interesting. Curiosity heals the human. As I was getting ready this morning for this interview, I saw a tweet from a heart surgeon who said, lack of curiosity is the greatest problem in medicine today. Lack of curiosity from doctors and from patients. And that sounds so much like what you're getting at. In your book, you describe how curiosity is what drives you, and that you solve medical mysteries by asking questions. You ask your patients questions.
Oh, sure. Well, I think some of the most important questions is, you know, tell me when you were last really well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And now what's so fascinating about that is people get this. I would ask anybody listening to this, think about that right now. When were you last really well? No, really, really well. Because all too often people come in with an inappropriate time scale of the problem.
What does that mean?
Yeah. So if you walk in the room and you say, "Wow, I'm having cognitive decline. It's just started a month ago, or a week ago, or a year ago." If we start, then our ideas are that the only kind of things that could have influence are the things that maybe started in that last month or year. But really, especially when we're looking at cognitive decline, um, there are many individual forces that have been acting over the course of decades that have gotten you where you are today with regard to cognitive decline. And so, thinking back to when you were really thriving, gives us an anchor point that, yeah, we have experienced a higher life quality. We have experienced a time when health wasn't something that was the top priority on our mind.
Mm-hmm.
And that anchoring is really important because then we get a taste again of what may potentially be. But again, then we say, okay, when were you last really, really well? But then what happened?
Mm-hmm.
And it's been fascinating to me that how many individuals will go like, well, I had this car accident, and then I went through this whole thing with the insurance company, and that was a mess, and then I went on my job, but nobody recognized that individual had a traumatic brain injury, and that traumatic brain injury now caused a little prefrontal injury. That's the front part of the brain that has a lot to do with how we pay attention and process information. And then they got more irritable. And because they got more irritable because their brain injury, which wasn't recognized by their family, they just kind of thought this guy had become a jerk. And now he got ostracized from the family, and he wasn't able to do the type of work that he loved anymore. As a result, he started to have more and more symptoms of being an outsider and depression. And that led into inappropriate eating patterns, which led into a type 2 diabetes situation. And now and diabetes is a mitochondrial dysfunction problem, and a blood sugar problem. And now he was sedentary, not walking around. He's isolated without a lot of connection with his family. And he comes to my office and says, "Hey, I have a memory problem."
Mm-hmm.
Well, if I try to name the problem, blame the problem, and tame the problem with a drug to make him have memory, I'm going to miss the boat. If instead I encourage him to ask better questions of himself. I would encourage everyone, just keep asking why, because the body is rational. Healing is rational. That's what's really
Right.
fun about this. And um and so if you just keep asking why, you may start uncovering what's underneath. What is really the root of the root of the root? And if we can fix those things, and things like neurofeedback can be tremendously helpful for traumatic brain injury, then wow, maybe several layers up are going to have effect. So, I mean, that's one example of how can you ask a different question and have that create an entirely different opportunity for improvement.
I feel like I've just been on a whole journey with you into this story, and it was just such a good example of how one thing leads to another, to another, to another. And if you just go to a, shall we say, mainstream doctor, not somebody with your unusual predilections, uh,
With my obsessive
uh,
curiosity, I mean, let's
yeah,
just be honest
right.
here. Let's call a spade a spade.
Well, I love that. I absolutely love that. You've got the symptom, take this medication. and you're going to miss this whole journey. It started with a car accident, perhaps, and you just showed how it could all play out. And I think that um, this might be a good thing for people listening to think about before they go to a doctor. If you ask yourself a question like that and spent the time, maybe did a timeline, and you showed up at the doctor's office, that's precious time. It also could be expensive time that you're sitting in that office with a doctor, and you show up and you say, "Doctor, I've been thinking, I had this car accident, or it all started when I took that trip to that exotic location and then I didn't feel well,
Yes.
or when I moved into that new house, maybe there was mold," things like that.
Yes.
And you come in, you've already asked yourself this question and put in the time. Your visit with your doctor is going to be more effective, possibly.
Tremendously more effective. And not only that, your mind is prepared. And so not only do you give that physician the best chance to help you, right? It's a team sport. I mean, healthcare is a team sport. I can't read people's minds. I mean, yes, I do quantitative EEGs and I can read their brain waves. That doesn't mean I can read their minds. And so, um, it's incredibly important to find someone that you can ask questions of and demand that. But being prepared, it is going to open that clinician to the possibility of diving in deeper, right? Being able to take in your large story and also seeing how invested you are in your improvement, in your well being. It's inspiring. Listen, I have so much compassion for my fellow physicians, and it is a rough world out there. Do you know my profession now ranks the highest in suicide rates?
Oh, wow.
Medical doctors are dropping like flies, and
Oh,
there's a
wow.
lot of reasons for that. And gosh, my medical school classmates, they're some of the best people I have ever known. They're good people that go into medicine for really good reasons and want to be of service. And then a system can kind of grab them and pull them, and little by little, they don't end up living the dream that they had when they were young,
That's right.
right?
Right. Well, they went in there, they want to give, they're often very creative, very innovative, and the way the system is set up, name, blame, tame. Here's the medication that the algorithm tells you to give to this patient. It's so limited. The art and science of medicine is being squashed. It's serious stuff,
And
you know?
the joy, because because when you come to a physician's appointment prepared like that and interested and engaged and wanting to be part of the solution, it is inspiring to the clinician very often. And then that inspiration works to your benefit. That's
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 right.
that's
You want your doctor motivated to work with you,
absolutely,
excited
you
about your
know?
case. And I should mention I'm a health coach. And so asking questions like you ask is our stock and trade, like asking a question like, well, what's your intuition telling you?
Mhm.
That can lead you someplace. So, okay, a complex, magnificent, unique individual is sitting in your office with their own particular mysterious medical situation. You've asked questions, you've heard answers. Now, what are you asking yourself? What's the process that you go through next to obtain the data you need to start solving the mystery?
Well, we need to make sure the foundations are met. And that would be through a series of labs that are understood what type of biological abnormalities may be present. And then the rest of the evaluation would be driven by what we would learn in that patient interview. What are the underlying causes that may be at risk? You mentioned mold. I think that's a very important component. Prior head injury, and nutritional deficiencies, lack of nutrition, many, incredibly poor nutritional status in some individuals,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
hormonal deficiencies. Um, it's it's not one thing. That is what I'm absolutely certain of. When a person has come to me with problems with neurodegeneration, I can guarantee you it's not one thing. It may be infectious, it may be autoimmune, so the process is a peeling the onion process. So let's go after everything that has the most likelihood for being an underlying cause that we can do something about. Let's dig in. And then the gold standard is patient response. Are you actually moving the needle? And to know if you're moving the needle, it's very important to get neurocognitive testing done. Now, that's a big word, but neurocognitive is just essentially how well is your brain performing.
Okay.
And there's some very quick in-office tests that can be done. There are more extensive computer tests that can be done. I use one called CNS vital signs, which is really good for high-performing individuals. And then there's MoCA and the mini mental status exam. There's a whole bunch of them.
Right.
Or you can send a patient for, a very full battery of cognitive testing by a neuropsychologist. But that's all done so you can really say, let's put a line in the sand and let's see exactly where this individual is and how are we making a difference as we move forward.
And so the doctor who's most set up to do this is a neuropsychologist. Is that what you said? Or a
No,
neurologist
what
or a
I'm saying
functional
is that
medicine? Who?
everybody, a primary care doctor, can do a CNS vital signs or a MoCA or a mini mental status exam. There's many of these tests that can be done by a primary care doctor, and should be. They should be part of a good exam in an older individual on a yearly basis. You get your brain checked,
Hmm.
right?
You get your brain
Just like you get
checked.
your blood pressure checked, get your brain checked. Put a line
Get
in
your
the
brain
sand.
checked.
Exactly.
And so people who are listening should know that you can, in fact, go to your primary doctor
Yes.
and say, I would like to get my, a cognitive test.
Yes.
That you don't have to go to the fancy specialist to at least start. You can start with your primary doctor. And probably most people don't know that.
It's always very important to start where you are with what you have, with what you can do. Don't wait. The worst thing that you can do in this endeavor is to wait. And if you don't have a specialist nearby that is exactly what you're looking for, start where you are and then find that partner to continue moving forward with.
That's right. Well, that's part of the process, as we were talking about at the beginning, that solving these, that's why you made it Alzheimering. You made it a verb. We're in the process of finding the support that we need, finding the experts we need, maybe the family support we need. It's a process that we are undertaking. So let's go through some of your favorite techniques. And I kind of want to jump in because you're so excited about regenerative plasma exchange, and probably most people haven't heard of it. I hadn't heard of it till I discovered you. So, what is this thing?
It is very exciting. I think the simple thing. I think you used it in my introduction of an oil change for the brain,
Yes, yes,
right?
I use
And it's a
yeah.
really easy way to start thinking about things because in your car, if you don't change the oil, you just let the motor oil run and run and run. What's going to happen to the engine over time? You're going to have more wear and tear, and you're going to cause more ongoing damage. Now, your car engine can't heal itself, unfortunately. So as soon as you have had that damage, it's not going to magically start to seal its own seals and repair its pistons and things cars do. I'm not a car expert. I'm a human expert. So,
Right, right.
so I get out of my range when I start talking too much car. But if we think about that the cleanliness, the cleanness of our fluids is what enables this. We're a water-based organism, right? About 70% of the water that is in us is inside of cells, and about 30% of the water that's inside of us is outside of our cells. And this water that's outside of our cells, some of it is in our bloodstream, and so this is what we call plasma. And if you have dirty plasma, how would you get dirty plasma? Right? You get dirty plasma by eating dirty food, for instance, right?
That's a common one, eating crummy food. That's
Eating
common.
crummy food, you're going to bring nasty toxins in, right? What if you breathe polluted air, which we know is a risk factor for Alzheimer's disease? That's going to make your plasma dirty. What if you put toxins on your skin that we call cosmetics?
Oh,
Those eventually get into your plasma, into this fluid that's circulating all around your body and bathing all of your cells. But what's interesting in Alzheimer's disease is that we start to produce these molecules of damage, like amyloid beta 42 or phosphorylated tau. And these molecules of damage in the brain will get cleaned out of the brain to an extent through the plasma, and it will start to build up in the plasma.
Oh,
So the question is, can we clean our plasma? Can we do an oil change on our own body? Can we remove the plasma that is already in our body that's dirty with um, proteins that have been rusted, with the markers of inflammation, with the products of dead cells, with the fragments of mitochondria, all the things that are floating through our system? Maybe the messages of inflammation we call cytokines. What if we took all of that plasma that is dirty, just as a simple way of saying it,
right.
removed it and replaced it with a very clean replacement fluid that would, and what effect would that have on health? It's really a very simple idea.
It's kind of magical sounding.
As soon as you step back for a second, you go like, wow, yeah, all of every health behavior, almost every health behavior changes the quality of your plasma, either by putting good nutrients into it or cleaning toxins out of it. Um, the plasma is the great interface in between the outside world, which would be your skin, your lungs, and your gut, and your innermost parts of all of your organs. So, if we can clean this plasma, what will happen to the health of the cells that this plasma bathes? And that is where things get really exciting. So, did you get that?
Yeah, I did. Let's get into the nitty-gritty of it, but, um, first I want maybe we should talk about what is good plasma hygiene so we don't we don't even need this fancy treatment that we're going to talk about, that we maintain as clean as possible plasma. Tell us how to live so that we're exercising good plasma hygiene, which
I love that.
most of us have never thought about.
Well, it is almost every single lifestyle. Think of having a regular bowel movement. Let's just get as simple as that. What if you're not cleaning out your bowel on a regular basis? Well,
It's going to show up in your plasma.
that poo that's inside of you starts to kind of get ongoingly metabolized, and more of those molecules find their way into the plasma. One of the We know that fiber is important for the prevention of virtually every chronic disease. And fiber helps us essentially clean out our major disposal route, right?
So a high fiber diet is good for your plasma
High
hygiene.
fiber diet is excellent for your plasma. How about eating high quality food? So, eating fresh fruits and vegetables, and keeping away from too much sugar. What happens if you eat too many sugar or carbohydrates? Sugar goes up inside the plasma. You would say it goes up inside the blood, but it really goes up in the plasma, and it actually candy coats the hemoglobin molecules. We call that hemoglobin A1C. And if you have too high a blood sugar for a long period of time, you actually candy coat the molecules that carry oxygen, and it candy coats all of the molecules in your body to a degree. So, keeping your sugar intake really to nothing. I don't think sugar is a terrible thing that the industrial age has brought upon us with regard to health,
Yeah.
and being very cautious about simple carbohydrates of all sorts. Those are very important things. Another thing that keeps your plasma clean is breathing clean air. It's very clear that the closer you live to a major roadway, the higher your rates of Alzheimer's disease. Now, it's like, wow, that's amazing.
Uh-huh.
The things you breathe in get into your brain, possibly some straight through your nose, but a lot through your plasma, because the things that come into your lungs have to get into your bloodstream to get through your body.
I see.
So it really is, when you're asking a list, this is really the list of modifiable health factors for Alzheimer's disease overall.
Did you put exercise in there? You had mentioned it before. Does exercise affect plasma?
Certainly. So, how is plasma cleaned in general? Well, it gets cleaned through your kidneys, it gets cleaned through your liver. You improve your blood flow via exercise. You're actually going to increase the amount of plasma that's going through these organs. But more than that, you're going to increase the mitochondrial function, your energy production capacity. And then that's going to enable you to man the pumps. You have many, many, many cellular pumps that pull out toxins and deposit them in urine or that deposit them into bile. And so exercise helps there. I mean, exercise has so many potential benefits. We can go on and on talking how it improves your plasma, but it really improves the function of your whole being.
So basically, a good, healthy, clean, active lifestyle is going to be very good for your plasma. We just so hopefully we avoid having to wind up in your office getting this plasma exchange.
So if you think about, why are nutritional supplements, how do they get into your body? Well, they get in through your plasma. They get in through the gut, through the plasma. What you eat, it comes through there. It is the grand interface in between your outside world and your inside world.
Okay, so we're going to be good to our plasma. From now on, we hereby promise, we swear, we're going to be so good to our plasma. Okay, what happens? We show up in your office. What does this regenerative plasma exchange, what does it actually look like? What's the process?
Sure. Well, I think I do want to emphasize that um, all of these other things matter, right? I look at plasma exchange and the data I'm going to share with you is super exciting. I think it's the most exciting thing that has happened in the realm of the treatment of Alzheimer's disease that exists.
Wow.
And it is very important to continue to seek the underlying causes and treat the other causes. This is not a, hey, I'll do that so I don't have to pay attention to anything else. Let's be very clear about that. The best therapy is a complete assessment and engagement of all the factors that can be causing you issues. So, with that, I just want to make that as a caveat because too many people want to have the silver bullet. And while this is super exciting, the best therapy is all of the above.
All of the above. The process, as we started out, is a process that you have to actively
It
participate
is,
in.
yeah. Life is right. Life, life,
That's
life
life.
is an active process.
I kind of noticed that.
Exactly. Right.
That's
Yeah,
become clear to me.
no spectators allowed. So,
No, no.
let's say, how does this work, right? So, if you've been evaluated and we recognize that yes, you would be a good candidate for plasma exchange. It's pretty simple. We have some early labs that we do for tracking purposes. We're very specific on how we customize this replacement fluid that comes in your body. So we get some labs to begin with. And then you come into a very comfortable space. We have a facility in Nashville, Tennessee. It has been custom built for the delivery of plasma exchange. We do a large amount of this type of therapy for people that come in from all across the United States.
Mhm.
And you come and sit in a very comfortable chair. Um, and at that time, we put a big IV needle in each arm. That's the least comfortable part of the procedure. And then blood is pulled out of one of those IVs and it goes into our plasma exchange machine. There it is mixed with an anticoagulant, something to kind of make sure the blood doesn't clot as it goes through this whole process.
Right.
And then it goes into a centrifuge that just continuously runs. In the centrifuge, it separates out the heavy cells and platelets, that part of the blood that we want to keep, from the plasma, the liquid part of the blood. That liquid part of the blood that has all the stuff in it we want to remove gets discarded. And in its place, there becomes another line that has a mixture of albumin and other replacement components that then get mixed with all of your cells. And so, this new mixture of cells and replacement plasma, it looks just like fresh, clean blood coming back in your other arm. And so this oil change, this fluids change continues to go on, and it takes probably about 2 hours. And by the end of that time, we have removed essentially the equivalent of all of the plasma that was in the body to begin with. So
Wow.
that's the volume, and and that is what I'm going to talk about next is the AMBAR study, which really gives us our scientific support about why we do this in Alzheimer's disease. But so the process is really sitting there. The side effects are pretty minimal. It can be the histamine reactions can go up or blood pressure can go down. Um, but we really manage those things very carefully, and they're not usual because of the particular protocol that we have developed. And then sometimes people get symptoms of getting low calcium, and that would be like numbness around the mouth or the fingers, and that's very simple to treat with a little extra calcium and or slowing the procedure down a bit. We only do this procedure in individuals, or generally, there's a few exceptions, but we only do this in procedure in individuals that have good veins. That's one of the most important part
Oh,
of this
okay.
because
Okay, good
because with
veins.
good veins, we're able to just use these peripheral IVs, which are very safe. The downside, what people misunderstand about plasma exchange, especially regenerative plasma exchange, is that they're used to this procedure being done in hospitals on very sick people. There's kind of a joke in the apheresis world that when all else has failed, you call in the apheresis doctor, and when in doubt, apheresis it out. And it just means that we don't know what else to do with this person, and they have some evil humor in their blood. Do that thing you do and clean it out. And usually in the hospital, people have a very big central catheter in their neck or their shoulder. And that central catheter is large. It's predisposed to becoming infected or causing blood clots. So we don't use any of those, and that keeps the risk down substantially.
It's very exciting. Okay, so tell us um, about the ANBAR study, which I know you're very excited about, and about somebody that you've treated for cognitive problems that has benefited from this because it sounds like such a wonderful resource that most people don't know about, and probably most doctors don't know about it. So let's help get the word out.
Well, I will tell you this, that apheresis in general, there's very few of
Which
us that
please
are.
define it. Define that word because
Thank
our
you,
audience
thank you,
probably
thank you. I
doesn't
was
know
just
it.
going to do that. So, yeah,
Oh,
you're
okay.
good.
All
No,
right.
it's fabulous. I'm glad you catch me. You're such a good host because of you. You're making certain people really understand these really complex topics, and I really appreciate that. Um, apheresis is the general specialty of taking blood out of the body, doing something with it, and putting it back in. And so when we can pull blood out and remove white blood cells or platelets or red blood cells or plasma, so that's the entire field of apheresis.
Okay.
And what's really interesting is we kind of joke it's the redheaded stepchild of medicine. No offense to redheaded stepchildren, but because there's no real one specialty that owns this procedure. So, sometimes there are kidney specialists, internal medicine doctors, pathologists, hematologists, oncologists, nephrologists, neurologists. The national meetings for apheresis are filled with almost every specialty you can imagine.
Now that sounds cool. Yeah.
As a result, there's really no champion for this procedure. It really needs a local champion to say, hey, this is important. I'm going to make this happen. And it's usually people that have a lot of passion around really seeing the utility of this because this apheresis or plasma exchange in specific is very useful for severe autoimmune disease. That is its conventional indication.
Mhm.
And I'm going off a little topic here, but it's actually we're seeing utility in long COVID. So we're getting ready to launch a study around treating long COVID with apheresis.
That's so interesting. So autoimmune,
Mhm.
long haul COVID, and what about other neurodegenerative diseases aside from
Well,
Alzheimer's?
interestingly enough, our first patient that we did this on was a Parkinson's patient, And with his first therapy, he did 2 different plasma exchanges, separated by a day. And then his wife calls us back the next week, and she said, wow, in this last week, he has restarted playing the piano, which he hadn't done for 6 years. He started gardening again. He went back and he sat at the board table for the company that he was the chairman of the board of, but he had walked away from some time ago. And he took me on a date.
I want some of this
Okay,
stuff.
this goes really deeply though. So, um, oh gosh, I got way too much to tell you, but because plasma exchange is treating so many different things, and one thing we recognized from him is that he had very thick blood. I mean, his blood was kind of like molasses, and in this gentleman, as we go through this process of plasma exchange, his blood kind of came down to a normal viscosity, or what we'd call a slipperiness of the bloodstream.
That's
And
huge.
so this actually put me down this long pathway that we're also investigating with regard to microcirculation problems. How healthy is the circulation in the very smallest blood vessels, the capillaries? And how about there's kind of a Teflon lining in the inside of these capillaries called the glycocalyx. And how much is that at play? And that's important because that glycocalyx, injury to that is associated with long COVID.
Long COVID.
And long COVID, we now know that there are persistent microclots. So when we think about changing, an oil change for the brain, it's an oil change for the whole body. And with COVID, we know so many of the symptoms are really neurologic symptoms, right? It's weird changes to taste and smell and brain fog.
Right, neurological.
They're really because the smallest blood vessels in the body are those that are actually feeding nerves. So they're called the vasovasorum, very tiny, small capillaries. So, but anyway, apheresis can be used for many purposes. And so it was recognized that, and the docs and longtime doctors in apheresis have kind of always been confused because when you did this plasma exchange on patients, they wouldn't only get better, many of them would start to get better more than they should have gotten better.
What does that even mean?
Right, right, because it's a systems intervention, right? When you're removing the plasma, there can be a whole bunch of things, barriers that you're removing from the system, and we're just quantifying this. We're actually doing some studies in proteomics, metabolomics, transcriptomics, a lot of big words to say we're trying to figure out what's in the plasma and why this works as it works. It's really remarkably interesting. So these docs noted that, hey, could this work for Alzheimer's disease? So I want to make a big shout out to Grifols. They are a company that produces plasma, and they funded a very large study called the AMBAR trial. And the AMBAR trial, they started with about 500 individuals with Alzheimer's disease, put them through a process, and they ended up having about 350 enter into the study. There were basically 3 active arms and 1 placebo. What's remarkable is this is a multinational, multi-academic center, double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled trial looking at this, at the effect of doing plasma exchange on individuals over 14 months to see what would happen with Alzheimer's disease. And the upshot of it is remarkable. If you take a look at everybody in the study, there was an average of a 60% reduction in the rate of decline of the individuals that had Alzheimer's that got apheresis, that got plasma exchange completed. 60% less decline over 14 months. We have never seen a therapy that can move that needle that consistently. But what's even more interesting, if you looked at the individuals with mild Alzheimer's disease, and there weren't enough in the study to make absolute conclusions, but there's a very strong trend towards actual improvement compared to their enrollment 14 months before.
It's not just slowing, and what you're telling us is it doesn't just slow the rate of progression, so you're not deteriorating as fast. It also has the potential to this one intervention has the potential to actually improve people's brains, to reverse the cognitive decline.
So I would say it's not the procedure that reverses decline. It is the body. The body is designed to heal.
To heal.
We are designed to heal. And what we're doing is what every good medical intervention should do is remove a barrier for the body's miraculous capacity to heal or add in something that is the body is missing. And so that's what we're doing. We're helping to break a dysfunctional, degenerative, disability inducing cycle. That's the power here.
That's powerful.
And so everything else you bring into the process, everything else you bring in, your lifestyle, nutrition, finding where those other problems are, those are contributors to the potential for improvement. And so I want to take you one other step further.
Please do.
What has been found and how I got into all of this really was through my longevity patients. So I had a patient who he was a C-level employee at a large Silicon Valley company. And I asked him, well, what do you want to accomplish by working together? He said, well, I want to live forever. And I was oh, you got to
A
be kidding me,
modest
right?
man, a
But
modest tech overlord. Okay.
but because of who he was and knowing just exactly how determined he is to make happen whatever he wants, I thought, well, what if I just believe this for a bit? What would happen? It took me down this road of assessing various longevity therapies to see which ones actually had some potential for use, safe use. And it got me into the world of parabiosis. And parabiosis is this little interesting study. If you take two mice that are clones of each other, an old mouse and a young mouse, and you sew them together with a little bit of flap of skin at their abdomen, after about a week, remarkable things happen. The old mouse that is attached to the young mouse's microcirculation starts to turn young. Skin regenerates, osteoporosis starts to reverse. Liver cells liver starts to go away from fatty liver disease. The mouse recovers its sense of smell, and new brain cells start to sprout.
New brain cells. There we just hit solid gold. New brain cells, neurogenesis.
Exactly. And then that young mouse actually, after if it recovers, if it actually gets stunted from being exposed to the toxin of old, because old in itself is toxic. And then the young mouse recovers and it goes on to live to its normal expected lifespan. Now, what's remarkable about this is that this mirrors what we know in stem cell cultures. If you put stem cells in a happy environment, a healthy environment, those stem cells are happy and healthy. If you take old stem cells and you put them into a younger environment, you put them into the plasma of young, they will start to act young. If you put young stem cells into old plasma, they start to act old. So here's the most important fact that everybody should remember. Your cells act the age of their environment. Your cells act the age of their environment.
So give them a young environment.
So if you have a clean and healthy plasma, because your plasma is the cell's environment, that's what's zipping around your cells all the time. If your plasma is healthy, your stem cells will act younger. And
Mm,
so it's interesting about, and that's why we call it regenerative plasma exchange, is because it's quite clear through basic science, animal studies, and work we're doing here that this is a multi-tissue regenerative process, not just a quote treatment for Alzheimer's disease.
right.
That's what's really interesting here. And so we're getting into a space that proves everything we've talked about in functional and holistic medicine, because eating clean, living clean, avoiding toxins, those things matter. If you put your cells into a healthy environment, you put your stem cells in a healthy environment, they're going to act younger and they're going to create more health. You put them in a more toxic environment, they're going to have more problems. So,
Wow.
yeah,
Wow.
you can see why I'm excited about this, because it's like,
I love your enthusiasm, and it brings to mind again how we started out by talking about the many, many multiple 1,200 at least factors that can impact brain health, and probably so many of them are being addressed by this single intervention of regenerating plasma. It's absolutely awesome. Tell us about somebody that you helped with cognitive decline
Oh, sure.
through this method.
One gentleman came to us and he was working with us on our MaxWell Brain program, which is a software package we put together to try to help understand all of these different factors that go into cognitive decline. And he was progressing nicely. He said, "Hey, I don't believe I'm getting any worse," but he really had stage 1 Alzheimer's disease, and he was had to pull out of running his business and was irritable and kind of angry, and sleep wasn't so good, and his very dedicated wife was bringing him to the clinic. And I said, well, we have this other therapy we could offer, so why don't we try plasma exchange? And the AMBAR trial was done by giving weekly plasma exchanges for 6 weeks and then a
Hmm.
monthly mini exchange. So we started this process of weekly plasma exchanges, and let's call him Gary. And Gary noted again after about 3 exchanges that he couldn't necessarily note his memory was better, but his mood improved tremendously, and he was all of a sudden getting happier. And we thought, well, that's interesting. And by at this end of the sixth exchange, he said, "Yeah, I can handle. I've went back to the office. I'm now starting to engage and ask questions again. It looks like I can do the books again. I'm able to think clearly in this." When I said, "Well, if you're on a train going the direction you want to end up, don't get off the train." So we continued doing weekly plasma exchanges with him, and he continued to get better. Matter of fact, he took over the office again, completely his own. His wife said his mood has never been better, and she laughed. I asked him, "Well, how good is his memory?" And she said, "Honestly, his memory is better than the 12 years I've known him." And we're like, "That's amazing. How are we doing?" And what was really interesting, they had an event happen at their business that a a uh, a vehicle crashed somewhere it wasn't supposed to crash, and he said,
Uh-oh.
before I would have gone absolutely ballistic. You could still see a dark cloud rising from the place where I live, because I would have blown up so huge in that. And he said, instead, I recognized, wow, that shouldn't have happened. And I closed my door and I started writing a new policy about how we're going to educate our drivers and exactly how we're going to deal with this. And that was all I did. And he said I acted like a real executive. And so it boggles my mind, how long had this Alzheimering process been going for him? And maybe he had an outside diagnosis of Alzheimer's. We didn't do a spinal tap, and we didn't do confirmatory diagnosis that was that the true diagnosis. But everybody agreed he had Alzheimer's disease. All of his friends, his doctors, that this is the path he was on. And I believe he really did. Um, but Alzheimer's is a terribly messy and insufficiently accurate diagnosis. Nobody should accept that diagnosis at face value. They should ask all the questions of all the other reasons that should be underneath of Alzheimering. So Gary's one of our star pupils.
I love he's probably going to live forever too,
Well,
you
and
know.
it's I don't know about forever, but what's interesting is his skin looks better. And so we also have some individuals who are really in because of this effect on stem cell behavior, seek us out to say, we know that there's some data show in mice showing that a clean plasma turns on body-wide stem cell activity. What effect would this have on aging itself? And so we're investigating those things, and we have some patients that want to see, can I move my aging biomarkers by this therapy? And that has proven out. So more to come on that. There's a whole lot more chapters to this story. So
Yeah, it's so exciting. And when you tell us the story of Gary, we see it's so much more than, oh, my memory wasn't so good and now I got my memory back. It's so much more than that, that he looked better, he's more energized, and he was happier. So it sounds like there was some neurotransmitter stuff going on there. I'm just guessing. And that his personality was different. He was calmer. It sounds like he had greater executive function.
That's true, and that actually proved out in the AMBAR trial. Executive function seemed to improve, and I do think a lot of this has to do with improving microcirculation. I think we fixed something going on with his brain's ability to get rid of toxins and receive nutrients. But I want to say one other thing. We have to make sure we have appropriate expectations whenever we're engaging any particular therapy. Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, these are all neurodegenerative processes, right? We're on a slope down, and the slope is steep. So we have three goals always. You always have to think there's three goals. Number one, slow decline.
Slow the decline.
Number one is to slow decline. Number two, stop decline. And number three, regenerate.
I vote for number 3. I
I'm
want to
with you.
improve things.
They're stepwise, but listen, I am a big advocate that we need to honor elders. Elders, the wisdom of elders is so beautiful, is so important in our world. And I want higher quality of life, more good days for our elders. And so even slowing decline is a win.
Yes,
And
it
what we
is.
know from the AMBAR study is we have a high degree of certainty that we can slow decline. Whether or not, and can we stop it and can we reverse it? Those are factors that I think have a lot to do with the other things that happen, and how early in the process have we intervened.
Yeah.
So this is a life project for me to figure out what works and whom when, and we're customizing our interventions, really trying to be as resource wise in this endeavor as possible. But when you realize that the cost of going into a memory care center is 60 to 90 to $110,000 a year,
Yeah.
the financial outlay of doing something like this all of a sudden becomes very reasonable.
Yeah, that's a very important point. And you're extending, hopefully, not only lifespan, but health span.
Mhm.
So you're allowing elders to have more good years. And what could be more valuable than that? I just want to ask you a practical question, which is the plasma exchange is an exchange. First, you get rid of the bad stuff, the dirty stuff, and then you put in the nice, clean stuff. But you mentioned that there's benefit to just getting rid of the dirty stuff. So if people are not in a position to come to you and get a plasma exchange, is donating blood something that is helpful uh, to this process of cleaning out the plasma? Is that a good thing to do?
Yes, we know that donating blood is a beneficial has some benefit for all cause mortality. And the question is donating plasma, would that be useful? There's a big difference between donating a small amount of plasma and doing a big plasma exchange. A small amount of plasma donation is designed basically not to stir things up, right? Not to
I
hit the
see.
reset button, not to create a new environment. It's really, hey, what's the amount we can take out that's not going to cause an issue? But it still may be of benefit. Okay. It certainly is a benefit to whoever gets that plasma. So I do want to encourage people to donate blood. I do want to encourage people to donate plasma. They're not going to hurt. All right. And those are interventions everybody can do, and it's for the good of all mankind. So I think those are really reasonable things, but we don't have enough data on that yet.
Okay. All right. Interesting.
And we would also say that in the period of time, I told you in the AMBAR trial, there was this period where they did intense kind of full volume exchanges, so the big exchanges like we do for 6 weeks. And then they went to these little tiny mini exchanges once a week. Well, most of the improvements that you saw in the AMBAR trial, whoop, happened those 6 weeks when they were doing the more intensive exchanges more frequently. And then
Right.
things plateaued and even dropped off after that time. So the dosing and frequency of like how much plasma exchange and how frequently should the plasma exchange be, all those are questions that we are working to sort out with ourselves and our clinical partners.
Wow. It's so exciting to see you invent the future this way, to have to create and refine a technique that improves things on so many fronts simultaneously. It's absolutely fabulous. And I know I wish we had more time because we could talk. You do other things in conjunction. You give supplements, and you can do neurofeedback and electrical stimulation. You have so many tricks that you can do. But we're running out of time. But maybe could you I want to return to the idea of curiosity. I think it's so important because that's what drives you and that's what's going to drive medicine forward. And maybe just, as we unfortunately have to sign off because I'd love to keep talking, but maybe give people a pep talk about how they can use curiosity in their own life on behalf of their health. What should they be doing? What should they be thinking?
Oh, what a great question. What a great question. You know, humans are characterized as problem solvers, right? That's what we do. And I would encourage anybody that is faced with a health problem to recognize that their body is designed to heal. And that is a fact that I can say. And that asking the question, three main questions. What thing is in my environment that is, unhealthy for me, is not good for my body's ability to heal, to be present, and how could I remove that and bring more joy into me simultaneously, right?
Mm-hmm.
What thing is out there that I obviously need, and that if I got it, it would bring me more joy? And then what dysfunctional pattern or cycle am I in that I could retrain or reset myself out of that would also bring me more joy? I think it's really important to recognize that good quality health is not a drag. Okay. This is not a sentence to take care of oneself.
Right.
It is a privilege. And to really to feel that sense of, man, I am taking care of myself, that it gives a level of self-esteem that is very important. Just to know that I am doing what I can, where I am, with what I have, gives you an amazing springboard for where else you could go. So you are enough. I would just want everybody out there to really recognize that you're enough. You're set for the challenge. You have what you need. Start where you are. Um, and if people wanted to have more information about plasma exchange, they can go to our clinic website, maxwellclinic.com, and we put a forward slash RPE for regenerative plasma exchange, and you can download a PDF that gives you more information about that if you're curious about that information and what goes on there. But I just really want to and thank you so much for honing on curiosity, because we all have this capacity to heal as long as we give ourselves permission for that to occur.
That is such a beautiful way to end this because it applies to every health challenge way beyond Alzheimer's. It's just, and more than health, it applies to life, to any situation that we face. That's why I said in the beginning, you're going to make us happy because you're going to give us hope. So thank you for the innovative work you're doing. It's so important in creating the future. And thank you for giving us hope. And may all your efforts succeed magnificently.
Thank you, Peggy.
And
Thank you for this time.
thank you.
Thank you for doing the show.
And thank you for watching. And I hope you were inspired by Dr. Haase. I hope you learned what he told. Your body's designed to heal. And if you're curious about it, there's so much you can do to start discovering new avenues for healing for yourself and new techniques like regenerative plasma exchange that maybe you can put to work and find those miracles that you've been looking for. So thank you for watching.